In March 2016, the public voted to name a new polar research vessel Boaty McBoatface. Ultimately, though, it was decided that RRS Sir David Attenborough was a more fitting choice. But the name Boaty McBoatface lived on and was instead given to one of the ship's autonomous submarine vehicles. And this week, data from Boaty's first research mission in Antarctica has revealed a worrying new mechanism related to rising sea levels. Boaty has discovered that winds above the Southern Ocean, which have been strengthening in recent years, due in part to increased concentrations of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, are driving warmer surface water down into the depths of the ocean and warming the water right at the bottom of our oceans. Warmer oceans mean melting ice caps. So this new discovery is vital to help us accurately predict the rate that global sea levels will rise and to plan for the consequences. I'm Heather Jameson, and I spoke to Southampton University's Alberto Navea Garabato, who led the project.
We did this study because we wanted to understand one of the most striking changes that is happening in the ocean with the ongoing climate change, which is the warming of the ocean abyss all around the world. Traditionally, we've thought of the ocean abyss as this really dark, stagnant place that would only change very, very slowly. And scientists have been surprised to see that it has changed surprisingly rapidly over the last 20 or 30 years. We're not talking about very much, we're talking about a small fraction of a degree, but because the volume of this body of water is very large, it actually represents a big chunk of heat. The latest estimates suggest that about 30% of all the ocean warming has happened in this very bottom layer. So we have to understand what drives that warming in order to be able to predict how sea level is going to rise in the future.
How did you go about trying to answer this question?
We went to the oceans around Antarctica, where the waters that sink to the bottom of the ocean abandon the surface layers, of the ocean. And we looked at the process that can change the temperature of those sinking waters. We had a very charismatic help from an autonomous submarine robot called popularly Boaty McBoatface. And what we did specifically was to go to a submarine valley where the water that sinks to the bottom of the ocean flashes through, and we threw Boaty into that valley to try and measure the temperature and the saltiness and the turbulence that that water experiences as it flows through the valley.
So what is turbulence and how do you measure it?
I guess the best way to explain it is what you feel when you are on a plane flying over a mountain range and it gets all bumpy. The same kind of thing happens in the ocean as the water flows over submarine mountains. And this turbulence is important because it helps to mix ocean layers at different depths. Otherwise, these layers don't interact very much. And by mixing these layers, the turbulence can change the temperature of the water flowing through submarine valleys and mountains. So we measured the turbulence using a very delicate probe that is actually mounted on the nose of Boaty, which can be likened to the needle on an old record player. This needle measures the tiny fluctuations, like tiny perturbations in the pressure of the water, triggered by current changes associated with turbulence.
And I think you also said you measure the saltiness of the water?
That's correct. That's important because salt, as well as temperature, controls the density of the water. And we care about the density of the water because that is what determines how far the water sinks into the abyss. The denser the water, the farther it sinks.
So what's special about Boaty? What were you able to get from Boaty that maybe you couldn't do before?
So what Boaty enabled us to do that we've traditionally not been able to do is to get very close to the ocean bottom and to get lots of measurements at a distance of something like 50 to 100 meters above the bottom. And with these measurements, we have a much easier job interpreting what happens to that water as it flows to the valleys at the bottom of the ocean. We found the mechanism that is able to explain warming of the water at the bottom of the ocean induced or driven by surface winds, by the strong winds that blow at the top of the Southern Ocean. The way this mechanism works is that as the winds intensify, they accelerate the ocean currents all the way to the bottom, and as those faster currents flow over bumpy mountains and valleys at the seafloor, they generate extra turbulence that help mix heat downward into the abyss. That water that sinks in the Antarctic then spreads all over the world. So as soon as you warm the water there, eventually you're going to warm the rest of the world.
That was Alberto Navea Garabato from the University of Southampton speaking with me, Heather Jameson, and that work was published in the journal PNAS.